Every single day, people take unwanted or unused items to thrift and antique stores across the country. But as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and we're here to prove it. Identify valuable things before you throw them away. Join us as we show and tell of treasures found and sold by a full-time reseller with the hopes of helping you find some treasures of your own. Welcome to the What's Sold podcast.
Welcome back to the What's Sold podcast. My name is Brandon. I'm here with my good friend Matt, who's had a very, very busy day racing around buying and selling things. I always know when Matt's been out buying and selling things because he's got a bit of a harried feel to him. So we're gonna take an hour together, and we're just gonna we're decompress and maybe decompose a little bit. You know, how are you doing, Matt?
I'm good. You know, I'm starting to suffer slightly from the impromptu spring that it seems we have here. It's still winter, but over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the weather has been fluctuating 20 to 25 degrees from one day to the next.
Yeah.
You know, the trees are blooming, plants are popping up, and that means pollen. So, you know, not great for my daughter. Has really been hit hard this year. We're going to have to look into a more serious allergy regimen for her because it's miserable. You know, as someone who's had really bad allergies since I was a child, it's really, it's not fun. It's not pleasant. And people who don't have allergy issues have no idea what that's like.
Yeah, we hate you. We hate those people.
Right.
They don't know how to suffer. I walk around with a wadded ball of tissue in my pocket at all times because...
Oh, come on. You're a handkerchief guy.
I wish I was, but they're kind of gross.
They are gross.
I'd like to kind of go that way, but I always feel like, ooh. I had a friend that would always have one.
If I used a handkerchief, by less than an hour after getting up in the morning, I would just have a sopping wet, like, thing full of mucus. There's no way I could use a handkerchief. Like, I couldn't do it.
That's so disgusting.
And that has nothing to do with how gross it is. It's like, how do you transport that thing? I don't put anything in my breast pocket here.
A little like plastic case that you could put it in.
That's where my not a trapper keeper. That's where my pocket saver or whatever that is. You know, they put it down in there so ink pens wouldn't. Pocket protector. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a neat morning though because I've done some fulfillment. I've got a lot of things I'm prepping to ship, but I also got a new a new set of items to sell for someone else, and this set included 3 categories of things: a bunch of comic books from the 1980s, a bunch of sports cards, mostly baseball, from the late 80s, and then 8 different large Thomas Kincaid paintings and or, authorized prints that are numbered that were framed. And this came to this person through someone else. So it didn't originally belong to the person who gave it to me, but it was left to them. So I need to go through and do that. But spending the morning going through these cards, reliving my childhood where, you get the Beckett price guide and you're combing through it and you're like, oh, this one's, and you just think, man, I'm going to hold on to these and get rich someday. Little did I know that post 1985, they start printing these things by the millions, and you can't hardly give pounds and pounds of them away now. However, there are a few exceptions, and I have found a handful, some Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards and a handful of Jordan cards and some Nolan Ryan cards. And so some of those, depending on condition, may be worth having graded at some point. And, we'll do a whole, I don't want to get down in the weeds on that, but we could do a whole show on the trading card world as a buyer or a seller. How are these people getting them? Why did mine only sell for $5, but the other one I looked at, I thought this was worth $1,000. What's the difference? It's the same card. We can talk about that stuff, but suffice it to say, it's been a fun morning. Who knows how much money I'm going to be able to make for them, but time will tell.
Yeah, and it's also you don't have any money in it, so, it'd be great to sell them, but
exactly. Now, if I choose to have them graded, I will pay for the grading service, and that's just something I got to go back to them and say, do you want to pay for it? Are you okay if I do it? And we just, whenever it comes back and sells, I'll just hold out that $14 I spent or whatever it was. And almost always they're like, yeah, do it if you want. Unless they need it sold quickly.
They charge you $14 a card?
It depends on your belief. It's kind of weird. They price it based on how valuable you think the card is going to be in the market if it achieves the grade you think it'll get. So you kind of go in and you're into their system and you put in the card itself. Then you sort of guesstimate, like, do I think this is an 8? It's a 1 through 10, by the way. A 10 out of 10 is just absolutely pristine. There are no issues with it, no corner dings, no scratches, no oil residue from your fingers, like none of that. It's perfectly centered. All the color is good. It's not faded. There are so many things, and they look under a microscope, so they see things you don't. People who want to buy and collect sports cards, they're going after ones that are graded a 10. The price significantly drops off between a 10 and a 9, and then anything around 7 or 8 or under, it's you have to decide, is it even worth paying to have it graded, because it may not come back. But for example, I've got a couple of Nolan Ryan rookie cards. If these are graded a 9 or a 10, they could be $2,000 or $3,000 a piece. Do I think it's going to get a 10? No, probably not. I'd be lucky to get an 8. It might still be worth $600. So if I have to pay $40 for a card I think is going to be worth more than $1,000, it's still worth it. But you have to get to a point where you say, okay, I've got this Bo Jackson card from 1990 or 1989, and ones that are graded really well are selling decently, but ones that aren't graded or graded kind of low, it's like $20, $25. So you have to kind of tell yourself, is it worth paying $14, waiting a month and a half to sell it for $25? For me, it's not. And that's not much different than calculations I do in my head throughout the rest of my buying, regardless of category. It has to do with how long it's going to take to sell and how much money I have to put into it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like, I guess it's ROI, return on investment. If you're
Exactly.
going to, if it's $10,
and time is money.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's sort of all the business calculus of that is of everything that you do and everything you sell is you get to decide, is this worth my time to do it?
Yeah.
And sometimes we've talked about that, the elusive, in fact, we did our last show was on things that you wish you hadn't have purchased.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though it seems in the moment, you're like, Nolan Ryan baseball card, well, if it only brings you $25 and you spent 40, that's a loss. So
Correct.
even though
Yeah.
it's a Nolan Ryan baseball card, it's just not worth that much. So
got to do your research.
And I remember when I took my comic book collection into the collector years and years ago, he's like, you know what? You're better off keeping these and giving them to your kid. And I was like, okay.
Being honest, I tell people that too. I mean, you'll see eBay listings, 200 pounds of, and they might even have sealed boxes that have never been opened, but they made 2 million of them. And guess how many are graded with PSA? Hundreds of thousands of them. And so it's not rare. It's not difficult to get your hand on. The chances that somebody else is going to sell it way less than you can is high. And what's the demand on something like that? It's not high. This is from the 80s. People right now want Otani cards, right? And some of these very successful,
signed
popular
Otani cards.
Sure. And that's what they're after. What I'm going through right now is someone like me who collected cards when they were a kid. They left it in their closet in their bedroom, or it's in the attic or the basement. And mom and dad are going through, maybe they're selling the house, maybe they're just spring cleaning, and they're like, these have been sitting here for decades. You're never going to, do you want them? And they're like, no, I didn't even know you still had those. I thought you just got rid of them in a yard sale, And they pull them up and they'll either donate them or they'll find somebody like me and they'll say, hey, can you, do anything with this? Like, I have no time frame, and they might not be worth anything. And sometimes they'll say, if you can't get anything for it or it's too much work, just donate them or pitch them. And that's good in the sense that there's no pressure, there's no rush, so I can wait, I can give it adequate time. But they're also not going to be offended if I come back and say, hey, like 90% of the stuff you gave me isn't worth the paper it's printed on. But I did find some that are of value, and I'm going to spend my time and effort on those. And usually they're fine with that. They get it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean, that's everything you're doing is basically people are having you sell it because they don't want to deal with it themselves. So in a sense, it's like, okay, I'll take, what I can get. Obviously, you want somebody that's going to bring the most value for it as possible, but there's no guarantee on any of that stuff. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I'm sort of blanking a little bit, but you're basically racing back from doing that?
No, I had something else I had to do. Another. I'm all over the place, as you know. I mean, I do fulfillment in the
Yeah.
morning. I go through some of that stuff. I got to go run because I'm the one who works from home. Sometimes, if things need to be done, I'm the one
Mm.
who ends up doing it in the middle of the day. And sometimes there are timetables on that. Sometimes there aren't. So, yeah, I'm just I just run around. Every day's different. I don't know what's going to happen, right?
I know it is funny with you because you and I work so closely together that your schedule, I have to be flexible with your schedule. And
I
that's
know,
just, I
man.
know that luckily I have a job that can be flexible because I
Hmm.
can move stuff around pretty easily because I work from home and work for
Hmm.
myself. So I can move stuff if we need to record at a certain time or whatever. But it is always a challenge when you're working for yourself and also, like you said, being the parent that can go out and run their kid to whatever. So those of you that are
Hmm.
retired and maybe you're empty nesters and your kids are off and you're just living the dream, well, good on you. Take a nice bike ride and then go do your work. But for those of us that are still slogging away, it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
So, how did the week of selling go, though, in general?
The week of selling is good. The issue I'm still dealing with is that on all of my eBay stores, I still have a hold on my funds until 3 days after the item's been delivered. So even though I don't have any restrictions, I spent over an hour today on the phone with 3 different people, spoke with a manager for a long time, and this is sort of the absurdity of the eBay world. I can speak with someone in management, and they told me that even they are not given the information on why a hold is placed, when it's going to come off. They can't tell me. They can't tell me why it was placed. They're not privy to that. They can't tell me that there's anything I need to do to have it removed, and they can't give me a timetable. So it's maddening. I don't know why it was placed. I mean, it's not that they're keeping the money. It's just that if I have an auction and someone waits to, at the end of their period to pay, then I ship it. It takes 3 days to get there. Then it's 3 days after. It's like 2.5 weeks later before I get the money. Meanwhile, I've spent all this money on shipping and packaging. And, I do this full time. I rely on regular payouts, not only to pay my own bills, but to pay the consigners that I
Who do
sell
you
things
think
for.
has that information? I mean, like you said, I mean, is it just a mystery to everyone? Someone's got to
Some,
know, right?
I have to assume someone very high up knows why they're doing it. Of course, I'm skeptical and cynical. So in my mind, they're just holding on to the money because I can't stop them. And then they're buying and selling stuff overnight like banks do, and they're using my money to make money, more money. And they like making more money. So it doesn't bother them if I call and ask questions. They're still going to hold on to it.
Yeah, until it reaches a tipping point where, and I'm sure they know this, they have an algorithm out there. Until it reaches a tipping point where people stop selling as much, and then they'll,
It's
throttle
coming,
it
eBay.
back.
I'm just saying it. It's coming. There is a time in the near future I may be shifting partially or entirely away from your platform because of things like this, and your lack of willingness to work with me and provide me information I ask for. So
I
it's
wish
too
someone
bad.
from eBay was listening, but they're not. Maybe
You
there's
never
some
know.
intern out there that's supposed to be listening to all the eBay shows, but
Hmm.
I just feel like sometimes that these big mega corporations, especially social media stuff, but all of them, that they talk a good game, but they don't really care about the little guy. They just don't. And you're just a number to them. You
And at
don't
the
mean
same
anything to
time,
them.
based on what I sell, I would not really be considered a little guy. I
Right.
sell hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of goods on their platform, and that means they stand to make a lot of money from me if I continue using their platform or increase my usage. So you would think they would be incentivized to work with me, not
One would
necessarily keep
think.
me happy, but doesn't
Yeah.
seem to matter.
It's crazy. It's crazy to me when you've talked about this. Every time I'm just like, wait, what? Why in
I
the
know.
world would they do that? And you're like, I don't know.
It's
When I
wild.
know, I'll let you know. So, anyway, all right. Well, let's talk about the subject we're going to talk about today. It's interesting because obviously I look at the metrics on all these shows, and when we do things like how do you position a item to sell on the page on eBay, we just everybody downloads it. When we do like bigger generalized topics, we still get a lot of people listening, but it's really interesting. So I'm hoping this is helpful for people that are out there selling full time. I got to imagine it is, because Matt and I were talking about it. He's referenced many times on this show using pawn brokers or going to a pawn shop.
Hmm.
And there's a show, right? It was at American Pawn Brokers, whatever that show is, where people to bring their stuff
Hmm.
in there. But as a full-time reseller, or somebody that's even a part-time aftermarket merchant, they're aftermarket merchants. Is it beneficial ever to use a pawn shop? And if so, when or why not to use it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll say first off that I don't utilize pawn shops very much. And the reason is that to get the types of items I want to get and sell and get them at a price where I can make money, pawn shops normally are not the best place for that. Now, prior to the internet, where it's very easy to research things, you would have a much better chance of finding, and this is true of really any retail place, whether it's used items or new items. It was a lot easier because maybe they just didn't have the expertise that you have, and they didn't know how to research a thing. Back then, it was just books, unless you knew somebody who knew about it. So I will find that if it's a pawn shop in a rural town, that's one factor that will make me more likely to go. If it's a rural place, seems like a smaller or kind of junkier place, I'll check it out. But if it's in a big city and they got a really clean looking facade on the outside of their shop and they got this big sign and you walk in and it's all swept really well and they've got this whole dedicated jewelry section to one side, it's not going to be worth my time, because I can tell based on experience of going in these places, they will have researched these very well and they're going to have them at above, a lot of times, eBay prices, because what they want, it's just like me listing something for 20 to 30% above what the typical eBay sale is. I'm just doing that because I'm not in a hurry and I want to see if I can get somebody to bite. What the pawn shop's going to do is they're going to list it high. And when the person comes to say, hey, can I help you? What are you looking for? Yada, yada. As you're looking, they'll say, hey, if there's a problem with the price, just let me know. I can work with you. Well, that's a whole part of their system is they know that they can drop the price on any given item a certain percentage. They already know it. If it gets into a big negotiation, they might have to go talk to a manager. A lot of times, though, that just like in the car business, like, oh, well, let me go talk. It's just a part of their strategy to wear you down. It has nothing to do with they don't really need the information. Okay, this is just a part of their business model, which I don't personally love. But if it's junky, then I will walk in and the way things are tagged, this and that, is everything being sold individually? Are there big lots? Like, is there a whole toolbox full of tools, for example, that's being sold all as one piece? Is there a tackle box full of vintage lures in it? And they're not, one place might have every individual lure under a case, like a pocket knife with a price tag on it. They've researched everything individually. Somebody else has just this tackle box and it's just like $20 on that. Well, if I open it up and I know that antique lures can sell well, and maybe I've dealt with some before, then that's going to be a good buy. And those are the types of things I've bought. I've bought tools. I've bought fishing equipment. I have even purchased instruments on occasion at pawn shops. They'll reduce prices if it sits for a long time. They just keep lowering it until they can move it, as long as it sells for still above what they paid for it. If people get things in on trade where there's not really any cash involved, they usually can do a little bit better, because it's likely that they've already made money off of some of the trade things and then they have nothing in it. It's the same for me. If I buy a lot of things, sell some, I'm more apt to be able to let a person negotiate on buying something else from that lot because I've already made all my money. So pawn shops are interesting, and I have bought jewelry at places like that, Southwest Jewelry with turquoise, this and that. And they're like, oh, it's just $10. And I'm thinking I sold one like this for $36 last week. So I know this is fine. Oh, they've got several rings and a couple of cuff bracelets. I'm going to buy all of these. I'm going to be $250 in on all of this stuff. I'm going to go back the next day and put it in a lot on eBay and sell it for $500. Those are the kinds of things that I can do if I'm creative with it. You may or may not be able to make a quick, really good sale by buying just one item and selling that one item. But sometimes if you can put things together in an interesting lot, that works. Sometimes pawn shops, like right now, we talked about it before, silver and gold prices are skyrocketed right now. It's over $3,000 per ounce right now of gold. And so people are buying not only solid gold things, they're buying a bunch of gold-filled jewelry from the Victorian-era, gold-filled watch bands from like the 70s and 80s, stuff that's not really used a whole lot anymore, but it's still out there. They're buying it to scrap and get the metal value. So if knowing that the price is so high, if you go into a pawn shop, or this could even apply to a thrift store or an antique store, where someone priced that good a year, 2 years ago, based on the price of the metal then, or they have a big lot of costume jewelry for $50, and you know that there's like 300 or 400 grams of gold-filled jewelry in that, they're paying almost $1 a gram for gold-filled stuff. So you pay $50. If it ends up that there's 400 grams of gold-filled jewelry in there, you can turn around and sell that for $400. That's a really good sale. And, the optimal situation is somebody priced a gold necklace or a ring or something back when it was $2,000 an ounce, and you can go in and buy it. They didn't think to go in and change the price. And now all of a sudden, you didn't have to do anything. You just were armed with the knowledge of the value of it. And now you can go sell it because it's still in high demand.
Yeah. So I'm not even sure I've ever actually been into a pawn shop before. And the only thing I know about pawn shops really is from like a movie. So I'm sure I've been into a pawn shop before, but I know a guy that once bought a pistol at a pawn shop, and I thought it was interesting. But can you explain a little bit about how pawn shops work so that if you are looking to purchase or sell things, the people that listen to this can kind of figure out, get a little wiser on how to deal with them if they want to deal with them? So how does it work?
The way that it works, it can work a number of ways, but the average way that it works is that they know the types of things that they'll buy. And what are the types of things that they'll buy? They'll buy the types of things that they are having success in selling at a given time. They're not going to be buying a bunch of bags of golf clubs in December because nobody's buying a set of golf clubs in December. But, March, April, May, and in the summer, sure. Or frisbee golf frisbees, or whatever it is. There are certain seasons that certain things sell better than others. And if you walk in on the off season, it's likely they're either not going to want it at all, or the only way they'll take it is if you are willing to sell it to them for rock bottom prices. Okay. They oftentimes will buy coins, gold, and silver jewelry as well. And they're basing the purchase price off of the current value of it. And then they deduct whatever percentage. That's if you're smart and you come in knowing what the value of it is, spot weight, and you can negotiate and ask. But most people, the majority of people, have something, they inherited it, maybe they're in a tough spot and they just got to get money quick. So they take some stuff into the pawn shop and like, hey, will you get this? They like to say, so what do you want for this? And most people don't know because they've not really done the research. They were kind of hoping that they're going to learn something from that person because they expect that they'll research it and then they're going to offer a price. If you don't know what the value of your gold bracelet is, if you don't know that it's worth $1,500 in spot value and maybe worth closer to $2,000 because it has some diamonds and sapphires in it, if you walk in and they say, well, what do you want for it? And you say, well, I don't know. I don't really know. And so they go and they weigh it and they say, sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't. There's a large pawn shop locally in our local area that I've been to many times. And if you ask, they'll tell you they usually pay somewhere between 30-50% of the resale value, not of the retail value. So let's say I have an item that's worth $200. We'll keep the math simple. It's worth $200. I go in, what do you want for it? I don't know. They start looking, they get on eBay, they find a range of anywhere from $100 to $150 is what these sell for resale. They're going to take the lowest price. They're not going to tell you the $150. They're going to tell you the $100. So they're going to say, oh, well, it looks like resale is $100. So we can offer you $35. And if you need the money bad enough, you're going to be like, okay, just do this. I guess, I don't know. And they're going to give you some story about, well, it's not that valuable. It may take us a while to sell it, blah, 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 blah. They're going to act disinterested. And then you're going to sell it to them. They're going to go take it back. They're going to go put a price tag of $175 on it. They're going to put it on the floor and they're going to put it on eBay or something like that. They may or may not do it online, but they're going to put it out there. Someone walks in and says, oh, this is really nice, but I see that they're selling for more like 150 to 140 on eBay. And they're like, you know what? Because it's you, because I'm in a good mood. I'm going on a trip this weekend, so let's just keep things good. I can probably get that down to I can be competitive. I can get that down to 140, maybe even 135 if you're lucky. Let me go talk to the manager. They go back, come out, 135. Is that okay? Yeah, that's perfect. They just turned a $35 sale into a $135 sale. That is the basic concept of how a pawn shop makes money. They will buy something as low as possible. They are not going to pay you almost ever for gemstones and jewelry. If you come in with a really nice ring, they're going to, with a diamond in it, a 1 carat diamond, they're going to say this ring weighs 8.5 grams. Gold spot right now is $64.5 per gram. I can give you, this is spot about 320. And then they're thinking, well, we're only going to offer 30 to 40% below spot. They're going to offer that. And then the person can say, well, this was a $2,500 ring. I mean, it was just bought last year. It's got a diamond in it. And they're going to say, yeah, the diamond industry is crooked and nobody buys diamonds anymore. We just pull them out and pitch them. I can't pay you for the diamond. You can go anywhere else. They're not going to pay you for it. And you'll sell it to them. They may be honest about that. They may pull out these stones, but if it's a carat or more, even a half carat or more, if it's a decent diamond, they are going to remove that stone. And they're either going to have, if they're a large enough place, they're going to have one of their jeweler people set it in another piece of jewelry to enhance the value of it, right? They're going to, maybe other jewelry that was bought the day before. You've removed stones, you pitch or you sell them off to, they've got people behind the scenes, diamond buyers and other gemstone people or people who are in the jewelry making industry. They'll come and buy them from them. So they're making money multiple ways. It's just a little bit of a shady deal because they're not going to be upfront. They're not going to be transparent. Say, here's the deal. This is probably worth this much. If you were to sell it to a spot, like just a place that buys gold, they're probably going to give you a better deal than I can give you. That almost never happens. They want you to sell it at the smallest amount. I don't exactly know. It completely depends on the place. If a person's getting commission off of the volume that they're personally helping sell, or if it's just I don't know how they have the payout for the employees set up. But the point here is, if you want to sell jewelry or gold or things, you're going to get offered a very low price at a pawn shop. They make money the way I make money. They buy things at a severely and then they resell it. The difference between me and a pawn shop is that whenever I'm buying something from somebody, if it's online, this is different. But if I'm buying something from somebody, I tell them exactly what it's worth. And I say, in order for me to make money, I can't pay you what that's worth. I have to, buy it for less. This is what I can pay you so that I make money. If that's not okay with you, I totally understand. But if you want to, I'm happy to buy it. That's how I do it. Pawn shops, though, have the ability to tell people the honest truth, and they don't, usually. I won't go as far as to say that they all mislead people. Certainly some do, but they have the information right there, and they are not giving the full picture, the full story to the person because they want to, it's all about profits over people. I mean, it's capitalism.
Well, wait a second. So what about the idea that you would pawn something and then do they still do that where you buy it back from them?
Some places will do that. Yep. They'll give you a loan. Some places will, for collateral, you bring in a thing that's worth $1,000, to them, and they'll give you $500 cash, and you've got 30 days to come back and pay them their 500 plus their $50 or whatever.
The VIG or whatever, right?
They're still going to make money on it. They give you your item back. And if you default, they keep the item, and they essentially got the item for half of what they can sell it for. So they know they can sell it and make money in the event that you never come back.
So it sounds like to me that unless you really know what you're doing, that you would never go into a pawn shop to buy something.
I will never go into a pawn shop to sell something unless I have absolutely no value. I have no money in it, I've tried. I've tried my hardest to sell it online. I just can't, and I think, last ditch effort before I donate it. Maybe the pawn shop will buy it, right? That's one, because any money is some money if I just assume donate it. But the only time I'm really going into pawn shops is to see if there's something that would be worth me buying. If you're in some rural places, like if I were to go back to Monette, Missouri, where I grew up, in the Ozarks, in the Southwest, I might be able to go to a pawn shop and find a jar full of arrowheads. Why? Because everybody has arrowheads on their property in Southwest Missouri. You know, if you have cattle, if you have a creek or a spring, I guarantee you have Native American artifacts laying around your property. And for years, people would just get these and put them in boxes. They're in their garage, they're in jars. So somebody came in and they were like, I don't have a lot, but I got these arrowheads. Like, well, I'll give you $20. Probably not worth that, but here you go. And now they've got 50 or $60 on it. Well, I get it and I look and I'm like, there's a Clovis point in there. Oh, look, here's a whatever. I know that each of those points in the condition they're in could sell for $100, $150. So there is a chance that I could go in and find something of value, find a lot of things where I only have to sell a few of them to make my money back, and then I'm making profit. I've done that many times, but I've almost had 0 times where I went in to sell something to them and I thought I got even close to a fair offering price. In fact, 90% or more of the time, if I've brought something in and they offer, I end up just leaving. Not necessarily that I'm angry, it doesn't make sense to sell it to them for that price. Sure, I could get the money in my hand today. Usually pawn shops, I hate to say they're not exactly predatory in the sense that they're not coming around to your house. But for example, here where Hurricane Helene came through and destroyed people's homes, wiped it away, a lot of people had very little left. And I know because I've spoken with people in some of these pawn shops that they're having to turn more people away. Like they're having to be more selective because so many people are coming in desperate, needing to get some money. They're bringing in things that are probably of decent value. And even though this is the circumstance that has led them to needing to get the money, these pawn shops, this is not a charity case. They're going to still offer a tiny amount. And to me, it walks the line of taking advantage of people. And I don't like that.
Yeah, no, and that's not what we're about, and that's not what the thing is. I was just curious about, we've talked about so much. I know that you've talked about using a pawn shop to get to get the value of a gemstone or something, and there's people there that could test it or whatever.
And I didn't mention that. That's a good point. It depends on the pawn shop. The one I go to is they have multiple stores, right? They've been in business for over 2 decades. And they have on staff the building is separated into 2 sides. The larger side has all of the typical things you would expect to see at a pawn shop: guns, pocket knives, instruments, electronic equipment, speakers, things like that, video game consoles. On the other side, it's entirely a large jewelry. It's essentially a jewelry store. It's just a part of it. And they have a certified gemologist in there. They have people who set stones. They're buying stuff online. They're selling stuff online. They're buying stuff that's maybe damaged. They'll pull a part off of one, put it on another piece of jewelry to enhance the value. They're doing all of that. So if you want to, let's say you're not truthfully interested, maybe you are, but maybe you aren't interested in selling it, to go into a place like this, you would go in with a piece of jewelry or a gemstone and say, hey, I don't have the way to properly test this. And if it's of good value, then I would be interested to know what you would offer. And they're like, yeah, no problem. They've got the equipment. They've got the piece of equipment that you put it in, and it uses x-rays and lasers or whatever it does to determine the actual substance of it. They can do that for metals. They can tell me exactly what percentage of zinc and copper is in this piece of jewelry, all of that. So if it's not valuable, they're not going to offer anything, but you've learned, you know what it is now. But they could also come back and say, yeah, this is 18 karat gold. This is an 18 karat gold solid gold pocket watch. Now, maybe you don't, that the case is usually between about 25 up to 40% of the weight of a pocket watch, because the movement is the rest of the weight. The movement is not made of gold. So if you were to remove that, so you could say, well, how many grams is that? And you could just kind of do a mental calculation. Let's say it's worth $2,000 in spot gold, and maybe more, since it's a workable movement or like a nice movement. They're going to offer you like $400. Like $13 to $1,500 less than it's actually worth. And maybe $300 to $400 for someone who doesn't know sounds like a lot of money. You mean an old pocket watch that doesn't even work anymore? Shoot, yeah, give me that $300. And they're just back there like... And so but I have used it to determine when I think that I have something quite valuable, but I don't want to risk selling it, and then a person who has better technology than me coming back and saying, hey man, this is not, did you test this? I would rather get another person's perspective who I know has the adequate equipment. So But if they come back and say this is 18 karat gold and I'll give you $2,000, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll sell that. I mean, it's $400 less, but a gold buyer's going to want to buy it for 20% less a spot, and it would be about the same, and you can give me money today. Sure, I'll do it. So if you can find a pawn shop that'll be honest and give you top dollar, then great. And tell me where they are, because I want to do business with them, because I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, it feels like I'm sure there are laws that control pawn shops and the way people do stuff, but reselling, it's the one part of it, which is I know why you don't sometimes like to be called a reseller, is that there is an unscrupulous part where people are horse trading and they're selling things that aren't worth what they say they are. And, oh, well, I got, it's like car dealerships. It's ironic that the more expensive the item.
Well, and I'll be fair, I don't think that these people are doing anything illegal. I think that they're running a business where if you are willing to sell something at a price and they're willing to buy it, then you're going to make a transaction. Or vice versa. If you're going to buy something at a price that they list, they're going to do business. They don't know your backstory. They have their policies or their procedures set. That's the way that they operate. I think the main issue that I have with these places is that they don't want to give people all the information, because then they no longer have the advantage. They have the advantage when they have more information than you do about the item. And so there's nothing necessarily unscrupulous about it. It's just that they're constantly, and in the case where there's desperate people, like I mentioned, and they're coming in, that just makes me feel bad for those people.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they have any other options other than that.
Yeah, they would say their attitude the same day as the early payday check people. It's like, well, we're offering them something. They need the money, and we're there
predatory
for them.
lenders. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that is interesting. I will not be selling anything at a pawn shop anytime soon, but it is interesting to look at that. And again, this show's all about knowledge. So you now are loaded with some knowledge about what to and not to do.
I hope there aren't people out there going, oh, no, last month I went and pawned, this gold jewelry and they only gave me $400. I mean, it happens. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. If it didn't happen, they wouldn't be in business anymore.
That's true. So what sold this week?
Well, before I say that, I teased last week, and I want to make good.
Oh, that's right.
I want to make good on this. So I held up a couple items, and I'm going to hold them up again. I have, 6 of these. And what these are roughly about an inch tall, roughly about 2 inches tall to an inch wide. These are little tiny, they almost look like what would be on the inside of an old brooch or pin, right? They're oval, they're flat, and they're black. And on the front side, they have these little pictures. Some of them are more colorful than others, but of flowers and leaves and maybe little fruits or little where they're budding out and that sort of thing. Here's a couple of more black, and then the last one here is green. It's the same type of thing. It's just on a different type of background. Yeah, they're beautiful. So what these are called is something called Pietra Dura, which is Italian. It really roughly translates to hard stone. And so what these things are, they've been made since back in Roman times, but these particular ones I'm showing were made sometime around the mid-1800s, and likely these specific ones were in brooches, maybe solid gold brooches. A lot of them were put in gold or gold-filled bezels around them. What this is made out of, they can be made out of a variety of things. They can be made out of something called jet, which beads, antique Victorian beads, and some other types of jewelry were made out of that substance in the past. It could be made out of black glass. It could be made out of, and what I think that these are, is black marble. So it looks black like onyx, if you know that gemstone. What these little pictures are, however, they aren't painted from a distance. You might think, oh, that's like an enamel paint or something. It's actually small pieces of semi-precious or precious gemstones that have been meticulously carved out and then inlaid in such a way as if you think of how a jigsaw puzzle fits together, that's really just shapes on the side. There's not really anything three-dimensional about it. They lay side to side. In these cases, the underside, almost like wood flooring with its tongue and groove, would be attached. They are made in such a way, like by very skilled craftsmen, to have these grooves so that when they fit them in, they're going to fit together kind of like a puzzle. and then they flatten them out, they buff them out so that it's a flat surface, and what you're left with is this really pretty piece of jewelry that might have angel skin coral or agate or jasper or turquoise or jade. And some of these ones, one I'm going to hold up right now, has flowers as a green color because it's entirely made of jade or jadeite.
Wow.
Most likely from China. But these were made in Italy in the mid-1800s. Here's one with a bunch of turquoise that are flowers, and they are really pretty. The last one here that was made of has a green background is made of a metal called malachite, and it's a pretty well-known. It's very distinctive. It's got these dark green striations. That's just the way that it forms, and it has some coral in it. I didn't know what these were until recently. I just thought that they were, and they are kind of in the same world as micromosaics, but they're distinctly different. The old ones, and the whole reason I wanted to bring this to people's attention if you didn't know what it was, is that they're terribly valuable. Something like this that I've been showing and talking about, without being in a brooch or anything to hold it or in a frame, can still sell for $150 to $300+ just one of these.
Wow.
If you get on and look up Pietra Dura in eBay, you're going to find all kinds of small, even old stick pins where the very top of the stick pin, really small, has this in it, all the way up to large, what look like pictures in frames that are made of people or some sort of scene, a landscape scene. But it's the same principle. It's just that it's larger. So they're making pictures, almost like if you were to cut things out of a magazine, like we all did that, right? And you put something together and glue it down to make a picture.
Collage.
Like a collage. But these are very meticulously made and out of really cool, like I said, gemstones, and they're grinded down. So if you come across something like this, or you inherit something and you see, get it tested, because it's very likely it could be in gold, for example. But familiarize yourself with this stuff, what it looks like, so that if you see it out and someone else doesn't know what it is, then, that could be a score for you.
What, is anybody making these now, or is this just a lost art?
Great question. It was more or less a lost art until the last couple of decades, but there has been a resurgence, and there are now a variety, both in the United States and in Europe, and possibly elsewhere, of contemporary artists who are creating things like this. And they're exquisite. I mean, I looked at some, and they're incredible. And they're demanding high prices as well, because a piece that's, made in this way could take weeks, possibly even months to make. I don't exactly know. It depends on the difficulty level and the cost of sourcing the ingredients, but sourcing the components that you need to put it together might be costly as well. So keep a lookout for that stuff. I think it's really cool, and it's just fascinating how the types of things that were interesting and culturally relevant and worn and known, for example, in the Victorian era, it's not all but forgotten, but a lot of people wouldn't have a clue what they're looking at now.
And it was all handmade.
It's all handmade.
Yep. So it's got that value in and of itself right there. That's really cool.
All right, so items that I sold. We'll talk about, I pulled out 4 things. I already packaged up probably 25 this morning, and I've got another 30 to do today. You know what all the ones I have to do later today are? They are all sealed, unopened, unused, early 2000s Simpsons, like the Simpsons cartoon show, action figures of all types of different characters and with different components, all this stuff. I mean, I had like 140 of them or something that I'm selling on consignment for someone else. So I've only sold about 30 some of them. So I've only sold maybe 20% of what I have in the first round, but it's already brought in maybe 12. I have to look it up. Upwards of $1,500 for the ones I've sold so far. So I think they're going to be happy.
Is the Homer Simpson the most valuable one? I would think so.
No, it depends. Not necessarily. You've got some of these, like the clown character, Krusty. Yeah, Krusty. Sometimes he goes for more. Sometimes there's one that was like a comic book guy. I mean, some of these are like very lesser. Like some of them are lesser known characters, but it just kind of depends. I don't know that collector market real well, so I just put a bunch of these up on auction. I was like, I'm going to let the public determine the value of these. I don't really know how. There's a lot for sale, and a lot have sold. I just don't know, I didn't know how long it was going to take for them to sell. But I was happy that I got some of those to go initially.
Well, Little side story there. My daughter,
Yeah.
who is 9, her mother is mad at me now because I introduced her to The Simpsons. She's like, it's totally inappropriate.
Oh
It is the
man, I
greatest
couldn't watch The
show.
Simpsons.
It is
I couldn't
so
watch The
great.
Simpsons. I couldn't watch Seinfeld. I couldn't watch Friends. I couldn't watch
I watch The Simpsons
any of
shows
that
with her.
stuff.
It brings me back to my childhood. It's so great. Anyway, the Flaming Moe. Anyway,
That's right.
all right. What else
Okay,
sold this
one
week?
thing I sold is this item. This is again, a Victorian-era hat pin. So it's roughly 6-7 inches long. It's just a steel pin that's pointing on one end. And on the other end, you have a green hard plastic, some type of hard plastic that is very kind of an Art Deco design. It was really neat. I bought a bunch of these at an estate sale recently, and I've been selling them off either individually or in small lots. This sold for $42. I think $42 is, or about $40 is maybe what I paid for, I don't know, 3 or 4 dozen different kinds. Certain ones don't have much value. Others can be worth hundreds of dollars if they are gold filled, solid gold, or have interesting rhinestones or interesting designs. This one was unique. I'd never seen one like it, which is why I put it up individually and sold in 1 week on auction for $42. Now all the others, it's just profit because I've already made my money back off of that whole lot. Another item I sold is this. This is also old Victorian era. This is a heart-shaped 14 karat solid gold locket pendant. It has, I wish these were diamonds on the front, but they're actually rock crystal, which was a pretty common alternative clear stone that was used back in the 80s, even in some finer jewelry as an alternative to the cost of a diamond. But inside, it doesn't have any pictures, but it does have glass and area on either side where you could put a photograph of a loved one or a friend. So it's 14 karat gold based on the weight and whatever. This sold for $270. And somebody, I don't know, maybe somebody will wear it. Maybe they just collect it. Maybe they bought it to scrap. I don't really know. But I was happy to get that. That sold on auction as well. That was actually something I sold for someone else, so I didn't pay for it. But knowing what the value is, by the way, I have a kind of a cheat code. I think I've talked about this before, but I have a ring on both hands on my ring finger. One's my wedding ring, the other one's just a different ring. I have one that's silver and one that's 14 karat gold, and the silver one is roughly half the weight of the other one. The other one's about 8 grams. The silver one's about 4 grams. So every day, the prices of gold and silver change. But if I'm going to go out, for example, and go look to buy something, I'm going to make sure I know what today's value of gold and silver is based on, or whatever the carat weight is, 14 karat, 18 karat. And I'll know how much an 8 grams is worth versus 4 grams. So let's say I find this little locket and they have a certain price. I'm going to put it in my hand and I'm going to take off a ring. I'm going to put it in the other hand and I'm going to say, which one is it roughly equivalent? Is it more heavy? Is my ring more heavy? I can get to approximate within 1 to 2 grams of what the value is of it based on the metal. And that will help me determine if it's a buy or not. So I didn't buy this one, but that is a window into what I would do. I would first figure out what the weight is. What is the base value? And then is it a unique enough item that I think I could sell it for more? Or would I just be faced at selling it, a percentage under spot to a scrapper? Couple other things I sold. I'm still working through. I bought somewhere around 600 men's and women's vintage wristwatches at an estate sale. You were there.
Yeah,
At the one that I bought several. So they're still selling.
For those.
That's right. There's two. You were the bodyguard of some of my stuff for a little bit. But I sold 2 men's. These would be considered more like tank watches, which refers to them being kind of rectangular instead of just rounded off. They're both gold filled and they're both Elgin brand, which Elgin had been making pocket watches and other watches for a very long time. They're both manual wind, which means they don't require a battery. You just set the time and wind it up, and then it should keep time for the day for you. They both work. They're running, and they were on auction. They sold for $55, which is decent. These are a couple of the nicer ones that I have. The crystal's not really scratched up much. They're in pretty good condition. They've got newer black leather bands on them. So I think that was, I don't know exactly why, but sometimes people buy them. I mean, there's a big collector base for pocket watches and wristwatches out there. And it's also an investment class where people will buy watches with the intention of holding on to them until they increase in value. Now, that's it's speculative because you don't know what the value, if it's always going to go up or. But I'll tell you, I love buying watches at antique stores or thrift stores, especially because usually they don't. Many times I've bought valuable watches for very little money because it's the same as other jewelry. They just know that when a watch comes in, it's $5. Regardless. Now, if it says Rolex or Omega or something like that, it's very obvious, they'll pull it out, right? But there are a lot of boutique, high-end Swiss wristwatches and pocket watches out there that the majority of the public, unless you're in the watch world, you wouldn't know the name. You'd have no idea. So because I've handled and sold thousands of watches, I'm familiar with a lot. Not all of them, but I can walk in a place and I'll even know if it's a nice enough name. It could be in bad condition or not working, and I still know I'll be able to sell it for more than what they're asking. So I think it's worth, in lots of different categories, handbags, watches. You need to familiarize yourself with the high-end brand names so that when you go in a place and you're just going to be looking at that, if you find a Chanel you need to know that Chanel, for example, is a high-end brand that sells clothing and jewelry, because I've sold tiny little black earrings, gold-filled, for like $500 for a pair of earrings. That pair of earrings could be sitting in a little, wicker basket for $3 in a thrift store in your town because they don't know. It's definitely possible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I want to find Chanel stuff because they are worth a lot of money.
For sure. Last thing here is this tiny little baggie. This represents 42 and a half grams of solid 10-karat gold. This is a mixture of old stick pins, tiny little pendants that would have held cameos at one time, a child's ring from the Victorian-era, a pocket watch chain and fob, and various other pieces. Some of it's wearable, but a lot of it's broken, tarnished, and it's just for scrap. So this, by itself, as of yesterday, was worth right around $1,700 in gold value. I sold it for $1,480 because it was a scrapper buying it. And of course, they need to make their money or else they're not going to buy it. So they bought it for that. This jewelry, by the way, has come in with lots of different costume or other fine jewelry that I've bought over the last few months that, lo and behold, it had a piece of gold jewelry in it or whatever. Because of the quality of it, I'm like, this isn't something I'm going to sell by itself. I put it in this little baggie. Well, I wait until I had 40-some grams of it, and now I'll sell it in one lot to one person for a really good payday. I could have sold them individually. I just chose not to. So that's nice. I can put this in a bubble mailer. I'm not going to spend this little because I want to insure it and have them sign for it. But if this weren't as valuable, this could be something that would only cost about $3.98 up to $4.20 to ship. So I could ship this for just $4.
What's the maximum? Somebody actually asked us on I don't know where it was, Reddit or YouTube or something, about what's the maximum you can insure something for. So could you insure that for $1,400?
Oh, sure. At the U.S. Postal Service, like if you go into the store, I believe it's $4,000. I don't know about other couriers, FedEx or the others, but U.S. Postal Service is $4,000, and it starts off at like $100. Like I think some of like Priority, you're gonna get either $50 or $100 just as a part of purchasing that label, and then it goes up incrementally for every $100. It's like every $500 or every $100 over that more that you want to insure it. It's like it goes up $5, $10. So I mean, I may have spent $50 or $60, maybe $80 before, which is a lot of money. But if you have a $6,000 item, well, I need to put that. I don't want to risk it getting destroyed, lost, someone trying to defraud me. I got to do it.
Yeah.
For really expensive things, especially.
Well, as always, somehow we've managed to go way long, but
Look
that
at
was great information today, Matt. I'm going to be looking for nothing but small gold jewelry in wicker baskets now, and
perfect
Pietra Dura, because I'm going to make millions off of that.
I know you are a wicker basket collector.
I'm a wicker basket kind of guy. Absolutely.
You are.
So, any last words for the folks today?
No, you have any last words for anyone?
I would simply say,
tell your friends.
The theme of this show is information.
Yeah.
So get as much information out of it as you can. Remember to follow, like, and subscribe. Tell your friends. Always helpful to write those comments, reviews, all that stuff. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back with a brand new show next week. But for now, we are out of time. So have a great week, everyone.
Take care.